Good morning. I hope you are having a beautiful start to your week so far. Being a Monday, and we're coming in live with a podcast just a little bit earlier than normal, but that's okay. So let us know if you are indeed coming in live to watch this one. We're going to be starting this one in approximately 2 minutes and getting today's live underway. So, guys, let us know. How was your weekend? Would love to hear what's going on in the comments. So, let us know if you're coming in to watch this one live. And yeah, love to know what's happening your end of the earth, how your weekend was, whether you got into momentum. And we are going to be cracking on. Tez, how are you, mate? I swear, Tez, you've got... Oh, you must have notifications on, right? Follow notifications, because you're always the first one in. I love it. I love it, brother. I love it. I love it. I love it. Hello, Jimmy boy. It's becoming the middle-aged men show. I love that so much. Hey, fellas. We're going to be getting this one started. We're a little bit earlier, and there's a couple of reasons for it. But being a Sunday for me here, I've got to kind of play things a little bit around Ocean's schedule, and especially when we've got the old COVID going on. So we're going to kickstart this one in about 90 seconds, guys. And hopefully we can dish you up some value on this beautiful Monday morning for you Aussies, or if it is for you, like me, Sunday afternoon. How's your weekend, Jimmy? What did you get up to, my brother? Excuse me. So good morning, ladies, coming in as well. We're live across both groups and, of course, all platforms, LinkedIn, Facebooks, numerous Facebooks. We're in YouTube as well. So it's quite a little gathering we got here. Hello, Christy boy. How are you, my man? How's your weekend, Chris? How are you handling the lack of sleep, brother? Or are you managing to wind it back in, pal? Right, we're going to get started in 1 minute, guys. Excuse me. Still coming off the back end of this COVID, so hopefully this gives us some level of protection when we get back out to Australia, eh? We're going to be planning this in over the course of the next week, so waiting for a little bit of clearance with COVID, and then we should be good. Super excited to get back there. All right, team, we're going to get this music turned down. And we're going to rock and roll into this episode. All right. I think we are good to go, my main men and women. So let's do it. Counting down on the count of 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Welcome back to the Better Body Academy podcast. This is the podcast that you come to when you're sick of the dumb diets and unsustainable workout programs. Now, I'm your host, Jace, from Better Body Academy. And we're here to right the wrongs of the fitness industry and, of course, get on our mission to change 1 million lives. And we're well on our way. We've had a thumping start to 2022. And so to those of you that were part of the weekend's workshop, the Freedom Eating Formula, I really do hope that that was either a penny drop moment for you, or for those of you that have been around the Academy for a number of years, of course, I want you to be reminded that really this whole fat loss thing is simple. I always say to people that fat loss is simple, but losing and maintaining fat is hard. And what are the reasons for that? Well, there's pretty simple reasons. The actual mechanisms of fat loss effectively involve a calorie deficit. We're going to talk a little bit about that in this episode here. But the thing that makes the whole journey challenging is not so much the fact that you don't know what to do once you're inside the academy. It's more about there being, interruptions and food is very much part of our cultural norms. And so there's temptations to stray away from what you want to be your way of life going forward. So I think it's completely natural for the road to be bumpy and lumpy. I know, for example, a few of the boys watching live, Jimmy, namely quite recently, you've kind of been through this, mate, and you understand that now that you've got the tools, you can slowly kind of find yourself moving away from the direction that you want to go, but you have enough awareness now to pull it back in. And that's the great thing about learning the tools forever. Okay, guys, so let's get started. In today's episode, what I want to talk to you about is the 5 reasonable fat loss mistakes made by intelligent people. Okay, the 5 fat loss mistakes made by intelligent people. Now, the reason that I'm bringing this to you is because I think for a lot of people that lay outside of the academy, they get very, very frustrated because they are putting in the effort. You know, they're really trying to move their journey forward and get results. And it can be really, really frustrating when you are on the treadmill, and I'm talking the metaphorical treadmill, not the actual treadmill, and you're on the treadmill and you feel like you're spinning the wheels, almost like a hamster on the wheel. It's so frustrating when you've got the work ethic, but you don't have the results. So I want to identify 5 fat loss mistakes that I constantly see. And I also want to go through each one of these and talk about why I understand how the mistake is actually made. And then I want to give you the explanation of why it's actually wrong and what you should do instead. So come with me on the journey through this podcast. And if you want to comment each one to reinforce it to yourself, it makes complete sense to do so. So number 1 fat loss mistake made by intelligent people is to think that you can outrun your food intake. That is number 1. Thinking you can outrun your food intake. Now, I've got to be really honest. Up until probably maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I was really unsure what I thought was more important. Okay? And this is despite the fact that I've studied university for 4 years as a dietitian. Like I should really know. But I think it's very easy, particularly if you have a really high work ethic, to think, you know what? It doesn't matter that I had those 10 beers. I'm just going to go and get on the treadmill and flog myself and I'll be completely fine. And I think this is the reason, this is the mentality of why we make this mistake. I think it's completely reasonable that people think that they can outrun their food intake. And the major reason is because until you get a grasp of tracking your nutrition, until you actually understand, firstly, what a calorie is in a basic sense, and then you understand what really you need on a daily basis relatively to what you're consuming, and then you start to get grasp of perhaps when you track your nutrition why you've actually put on weight over the course of the last 5 to 10 years. It's only then that you start to realize, because it's almost like the awareness kicks in. I always talk about awareness as like a light that shines into your life. And awareness comes when you've repeated something over and over again and it starts to sink in and you start to get the full impact. And I think for a lot of people, we work through this kind of, up and down, restrict, binge, restrict, binge, restrict, binge. And each time we binge, we fall off, we think, you know what, I'm just going to fix it with a treadmill session. And it just doesn't work. And it makes you more frustrated that you're just looking at yourself in the mirror and going, nothing is changing. So the mistake is to think that you can outrun your diet. You simply cannot. Now, I could give you a huge list of examples, and let me give you an example. The one that I always talk about, and my clients know the exact thing that I'm going to say here, is, and it's good because everyone understands what a Big Mac is, okay? And we don't actually maybe think of the full impact of this. So talk about a Big Mac, 550 calories, and yet the average gym session that doesn't involve any cardio is going to be like 80 to 100 calories burned. So this basically means that for you to burn off the calories in the Big Mac, you've got to do 5 gym sessions, at least. Let me give you something closer to home. In yesterday's workshop, we brought in one of our big key kind of commandments of eating for fat loss, okay, as part of our formula. And one of them is not to drink your calories. And I'm not even talking about alcohol. I'm talking about things like Boost juice, okay? and I showed that one Banana Buzz milkshake, 600 odd mils, we're talking around 600 calories. So this basically means you need to do 6 gym sessions to burn off that one Banana Buzz. And you're sitting there thinking to yourself, what the hell? Like, I thought that was healthy. Well, for me, health is a question of quality and not quantity. And this is the thing. There may be plenty of vitamins and minerals in that Banana Buzz, but the problem is, if you are consuming a Banana Buzz, for the average man, that is 1/3 of your daily calorie requirement if you want to be in a calorie deficit. So you just cannot outrun this. So number one mistake that I see constantly is thinking that you can outrun your food intake. Guys, inside the academy, we have the model called the trifecta for a reason, okay? And right out there in front is nutrition. And so when you move away from thinking that we're talking about needing to go on a diet and instead replacing all of the really heavy calorie dense foods in your meal with nutritious foods, that's what we need to do as a swap. It doesn't mean that you have to eat salads. It just means that we need to be conscious of what we're putting in our mouth because we're never ever going to be able to outrun it. Okay, mistake number 2 of the 5 fat loss mistakes made by intelligent people. Number 2 is depending on cardio only. Okay, so let me talk about why this is relevant. Okay, so depending on cardio only as your primary exercise component. Okay, well, let's just pretend we're talking about getting an assessment of how much petrol a car might burn. Okay, there's 2 things that we would probably want to look at. We want to look at the engine size of the car. Bigger engines are going to burn more fuel, right? And the second thing is, how much are we actually driving the car? What's our daily usage? So let's just pretend you were trying to decide in part of your budget, your financial budget, you were trying to decide how much money am I going to spend a year on petrol? Well, the 2 variables are going to be the size of the car, and then secondly, how much you drive it. And this is the equivalent of cardio versus resistance training. So when we're talking about resistance training, what we're effectively doing is aiming to build a bigger engine. When we're talking about cardio, what we're talking about is the equivalent of driving your car around more. Okay, does this make sense, guys, this analogy? And so most people think that their answer to being able to lose fat and keep it off is to drive their car around more. Now, this is a pretty reasonable thing to believe when you think about it, because driving your car around more will burn more petrol. The challenge with this strategy as your primary fat loss mechanism is this. The moment that you stop driving the car, the moment that you stop doing the cardio, the benefit stops. Now, do not get me wrong. Cardiovascular training is very, very important, particularly for your heart health. And I do think that it's important that we have some level of cardio as part of a fat loss transformation. But what I am saying here is that for you to be dependent on your cardio as the primary source, well, the problem is that the moment that you stop doing the cardio, the benefit stops. Does this make sense? Let's just pretend that you're going away on a holiday and you just want to kick your feet up for a couple of weeks. That'd be pretty reasonable to do that. But the problem is that if you haven't built a bigger engine in the process and all you've done is depend on cardio, what's actually going to happen is you're going to put on a whole lot of fat because of the fact that you're no longer driving your car. It's the equivalent of leaving your car at home in the garage dead. It doesn't burn calories when it's dead. Does that make sense? And so this is the reason why spearheading our trifecta model is, of course, nutrition. And then one of the flanks is resistance training. We want to build a bigger engine to make sure that even when we're on holidays drinking beers, our engine size is burning more petrol. The second point to that is that assuming that part of your transformation is that you want to look and feel better, I haven't even talked about the importance of resistance training for composition. You know, when you press yourself and you might feel skinny fat? Well, if you start a resistance training program, of course, that's going to help with you feel like, even though you've got fat on the top, underneath it, there is some kind of like, oh yeah, okay, I can feel some muscle under there. And as we get into our 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s and beyond, it's incredibly important because the rate at which we lose muscle accelerates as part of the natural decay of the human body. So if your starting point is that you have more muscle, well, then effectively you've got more to lose before you get to the point of skinny fat or dad bod, as we typically call them. So does that make sense, guys? And the mistake number 2, which is completely understandable, is depending on cardio exclusively. Okay, mistake number 3 made by intelligent people when it comes to fat loss is this: massively restricting your food intake. Massively restricting your food intake. So what happens is some people cotton on to the fact that, yes, it's my nutrition. Or maybe they don't necessarily understand what's in the food because they haven't done any tracking or they're not part of the Better Body Academy. However, they know that, you know what, I drink a lot of beer, or I eat a lot of garbage, or I have a lot of takeaways. So they just know inherently that the food is their problem, okay? And so if we know inherently that the food is our problem, well, if we lack the understanding around nutrition, what is the one thing that we would do to fix our food? Cut it down completely. We would slice it down. And if we do that, well, you're probably going to lose fat, because we know that all restriction diets, which lead to some sort of a calorie deficit, are going to lead to you losing fat. Now, what are going to be the problems? I see 2 problems with this approach of massively cutting food. The first is the short-term problem, which is how likely are you going to be to stick to that? Like, who here watching along live loves eating food? I love eating food. So if the plan that you have based your fat loss upon is just to cut out food, how likely are you going to be to stick to that? It's kind of like the proponents of keto. And I talk about this all the time inside the academy. If your plan is going to be, I'm just going to remove carbohydrates entirely, that's fine if you never intend to eat a carbohydrate again, because the moment that you start refeeding, well, of course, you're going to go back to doing what you did before. So the short-term thing is that it's just not sustainable. However, the long-term thing is this: massive food restriction is the start point for yo-yo dieting and weight gain. And this is something that I see immensely with ladies, particularly, of course with men, but ladies particularly. Here is the reason why. When you restrict food and you love food, you lose some fat, but it also pushes your metabolic rate down, the rate at which you burn calories. Now, when you eventually conclude that you can't keep this restriction up, what do? Thank God, the pressure's off. I'm done with that crappy diet, so now I'm going to feast. And so, this period of almost semi-famine that you've put yourself through is followed by a huge regain in fat, because you've followed up this famine period with a feast period. Now, let's say that the feast continues for 2, 3, 4 weeks. You are in a prime phase here to store fat. You store fat, you put on 2 to 3 kilos during this 3 to 4 weeks, and what happens as a result of that? You feel shit. You look at yourself in the mirror, and what do? It's time for another restriction. So this feast period is followed by a massive restriction period again, which can lead to a little bit of fat loss, but will push your metabolic rate down further. And of course, the pattern continues and going top to bottom. This is why it's called yo-yo dieting. Each time you refeed after a restriction, you gain more fat because you're pushing your metabolism down further and further and further. This is not a long-term strategy. So what should you do? Well, of course, inside the academy, what we talk about are mild, sustainable calorie deficits and replacing it with foods that fill you up. Does this sound like a smart strategy? So rather than cutting quickly and it being unsustainable, instead what we do is cut slowly and replace the calorie-dense foods instead with foods that fill you up, foods that are high in protein and high in fiber and slow your digestion down and make you go, oh my gosh. And this is the number one thing that I hear from people that start on our model. I went from putting on fat and being hungry all the time to coming into the academy and losing fat, but feeling so full all the time. It's a weird, a paradox. So number 3 is to massively restrict food intake is a mistake. All right, number 4 of the 5 mistakes made by intelligent people when it comes to fat loss. Number 4 is using a clean eating strategy. Now, all of my team that is watching this live, all of our clients inside Better Body Academy, they're going to understand why each of these things is a mistake because they've now learned why it's a mistake. So why is clean eating an actual mistake? Well, clean eating is a mistake because, as we said at the start, clean talks about the quality of the food. So let me give you an idea of clean foods. Well, vegetables and lean meats and unrefined carbohydrates and maybe lean dairy products. So this is a good approach. This whole food eating is a good general approach. However, if the exclusive focus is on clean eating, this has become such a catch cry for people, is what it doesn't talk about is the calories that are involved with that beautiful food. And I'll never forget one of our favorite clients inside of the academy. I'm going to shout her out, Miss Sophie Hamstra. Lovely lass that got fantastic results, over 10 kilos fat loss and lost that little bit of a belly shelf that mums get when they just can't move that last bit of fat. Yep, that's her. And she said it wasn't until we talked about this concept of clean eating versus being calorie aware that it really light bulbs turned on for her, because she was getting her salads and doing what we call the olive oil dance. Woo! Look at this healthy olive oil. It's so good. And by the way, avocado is good as well. So I'm going to cut my avocado in half, throw the whole avocado in the salad. And guess what? She'll probably never ever suffer anything like heart disease because she's got really good protective fats coming in, good clean foods coming in. But if those clean foods aren't measured in the calories, well, guess what? It doesn't make a difference. It does not make a difference. You'll be really healthy, but frustrated that you're not losing weight as Sophie was. It's all changed now because she's got her head around the idea that clean eating is only half the picture. Understanding calories is the far more important thing when it comes to fat loss. Does this make sense, guys? So, number 5, and this is our final mistake made by intelligent people, and that is attempting solo transformation, okay? Attempting solo transformation. And this may not be for the reason that you're thinking here, which is, well, of course you want people to join Better Body Academy. Yeah, of course I do. Let's be completely upfront. You guys should be. If you're struggling, you should be joining Better Body Academy. But at the same account, here's what happens in any transformation. When you get started, there is a shiny object syndrome, okay? This is where you are really excited about the fact that something is new. So because something is new, you're excited to be part of it. The activation energy to get involved is like, yes, I'm doing it. But then after week 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, what inevitably happens is life. You've got kids, partner, finances, career, all the things. And typically those things scream a lot louder than your health. And so, if they scream a lot louder, you typically end up having to deal with the things, and once again, the same trap that got you to the problem in the first place was having no accountability has become the problem again. You've got no accountability. The reality is, it doesn't matter whether you're trying to transform your health, wealth, or relationships, you are going to hit stumbling blocks and dips in your motivation, which is not you failing, it is completely normal. Everyone wants to be self-made, and I get it. Everyone wants to say at the end of the day, I did that myself. But the reality is, so many people fail in that process because they didn't have the courage to ask for help. Now, when someone comes into the Better Body Academy, they think that the main thing that they're getting is expert coaching. And that's certainly part of the picture. It's certainly part of the picture. But one of the things that I hear constantly said by new members is it's overwhelming the support that I get from people just like me inside of our community. And so whether you're joining Better Body Academy, you're inside the academy, or you're doing external with either another coach or another program, you need to have some accountability, because if you're doing this by yourself, what is going to happen is when you hit that inevitable stumbling block, which is there to test your resolve, which is there to test how much do you actually want it. If you've got no support around you, you're relying on your own personal willpower and discipline only. And I personally know that for me, even, that is really, really, really difficult. So guys, I am going to recap these mistakes for you so that you don't make them. Guys, the 5 mistakes made by very intelligent people when it comes to fat loss are thinking you can outrun your food intake. You cannot do that. Number 2, depending on cardio as your predominant exercise to run the fat off. Number 3, restricting massively your food intake. This is a mistake. Number 4, relying on a clean eating strategy exclusively. And of course, number 5 is trying to do everything on your own. Guys, I hope this has been a good, solid, value-based podcast for you guys. I just don't want you to make the same mistakes that the other 99% of people make. If you come into the academy and follow our process, you won't make those mistakes. And when you perhaps do, you will have the awareness to pull yourself back on track. Guys, this has been the Better Body Academy podcast. This is your host, Jay Stewart. I'll see you in the next episode.